Jungkook finally reveals the truth. This touching moment made Jimin cry. Loudly crying face sparkles. No one in the army was really prepared for what happened that night. Just as the atmosphere had calmed down, when fans thought that the day would end as usual, Jungkook suddenly appeared in a short broadcast that lasted only a few minutes, yet enough to change everything. The atmosphere was quiet, his expression was thoughtful, and Jungkook's voice sounded a little heavy, as if he had weighed his words many times before deciding to share them with the world. No one knows that the honest line that came out that night turned out to touch the heart of one person closest to him, Park Jimin. At first glance, the broadcast looks ordinary. Jungkook greeted ARMY as usual, smiled a little, then looked down several times. But different from previous broadcasts, that night Jungkook did not beat around the bush, did not joke, did not try to hide something behind laughter. He looked as if he was carrying a burden that had to be put down immediately. When he finally took a deep breath, the army watching from different parts of the world immediately held their breath. Jungkook leaned back slightly, closed his eyes, then said in an almost quivering voice that he had been holding on to something he wanted to reveal, but had always held it back. Those words instantly made the entire comment room explode, but it wasn't just the army that was surprised to hear the confession. Elsewhere, in a quiet room, Jimin watched. He watched from the screen of his mobile phone, with no one beside him, alone in an atmosphere that even he himself did not know how to describe. He knew Jungkook was going to talk about something important because he recognized that expression. An expression that only appears when Jungkook is really serious. An expression that only appears when Jungkook is holding something that has been buried for too long, and when Jungkook finally said that he felt guilty for not being able to be by Jimin's side in some difficult moments, Jimin lowered his head. Jungkook's words flowed so sincerely, so honestly, that Jimin felt as if his chest was being squeezed. Jungkook admits that, even though they were close, there were moments where he failed to be the person he wanted to be for Jimin, someone who could understand him without being asked, someone who could calm him down before he could even express what he felt. Jungkook admitted that he had moved away not because he wanted to, but because he was afraid to disturb Jimin, who looked busy, looked exhausted, looked carrying a burden that he never told openly. Jimin never expected Jungkook to harbor such feelings. He didn't even know that Jungkook noticed all the small changes in himself, from the way he smiled, the way he sat, to the tone of his voice every time he spoke. Jungkook admits that he doesn't feel good enough, that he feels like he failed to be the friend Jimin needed. In fact, in Jimin's eyes, Jungkook was always more than enough. When Jungkook said that he wanted Jimin to know how much he meant to him, Jimin finally lifted his face and his eyes began to glaze over. There was no one in the room. No camera. No reporters. There is no army. Only Jimin, who sat hugging himself, listened to the honest lines of someone who has always been a warm spot in his life. What really touched Jimin was when Jungkook said that he missed Jimin not just as a coworker, not just as a brother in the group, but as someone who made him feel safe. Jungkook said that when their schedules are tight and more distance is created, he secretly hopes to be able to sit back with Jimin, share simple stories, or even just laugh about little things. "I miss that calmness," he said quietly. And Jimin immediately closed his mouth, holding back a small sob that almost escaped. He wasn't the only one crying that night. Jimin cried because he felt seen. She cried because she never knew Jungkook felt the same way. She cries because their whole relationship, which often looks simple from the outside, turns out to be much deeper, more fragile, and stronger than anything anyone could have imagined. After the broadcast was over, Jimin still sat motionless for a few minutes. He thought about Jungkook's every word, replayed the sentences in his head, and tried to understand how Jungkook had kept them all this time. Jungkook, who always seemed brave, was afraid. Jungkook, who always seemed strong, kept something that he never even let anyone see. Jungkook, who is always cheerful, apparently bears the emotional burden that he hides so as not to worry Jimin. Jimin grabbed his phone, opened Jungkook's number, and typed a few words, but then deleted them. He didn't know where to start. How to answer a person who has just opened his heart so honestly. How to give in return without sounding like it's holding back bigger emotions. A few hours later, according to a source close to them, Jimin finally sent Jungkook a text message. A simple but meaningful message. A message that contains only 3 words. "I'm here." And Jungkook's response came not long after, containing a 3-point mark, as if Jungkook needed time to type something longer but couldn't. The next day, the atmosphere behind the scenes became a big discussion. The staff who saw the two meet said that the atmosphere was different. When Jimin and Jungkook met, they both stood still for a few seconds. There are no words, no excessive smiles, only mutual understanding glances that do not require any explanation. When Jimin finally stepped forward and hugged Jungkook, the staffers who saw the moment said that Jungkook was seen putting his face down on Jimin's shoulder. It wasn't clear if she was crying or just closing her eyes, but the atmosphere was so moving that some of the staff themselves were holding back Haru. The hug lasted longer than usual, as if time stopped. It was as if they were connecting something that had broken up because of busyness, distance, and lack of courage to open up to each other. Jimin patted Jungkook's back slowly, and Jungkook grasped Jimin's jacket tightly, as if to make sure that Jimin was really there, not just a shadow that appeared in the middle of longing. Their relationship isn't just about being together on stage or on camera. It's not just about visible laughter in the content. Their relationship is about understanding the little things that others often don't realize. About the unspoken word. About feelings that are never clearly expressed. About the presence that is always felt even when they are far apart. Jungkook's confession that day didn't just reveal the truth about him. It also opened the door for Jimin to say that he had felt the same way all along. Behind his smile that always seemed calm, Jimin often felt lost when Jungkook was immersed in his busy life. He often hoped that Jungkook would appear suddenly with a cheerful smile. He often wishes the two could go back to the way they were, when there was no distance, no boundaries, and no fear of being honest with each other. After the incident, many said that the atmosphere between the two looked warmer. They seemed to smile at each other more often, are more often in the same room for no particular reason, and more often share small moments that seem very meaningful. Jungkook's confession that night was not only a moving moment for Jimin. It became a turning point for both. A point that reminds them that sincere relationships are not always visible to the outside world, but are felt very strongly by those who live them, and perhaps for ARMY around the world. This is one of the most candid moments ever between two figures who have always been looked up to closely. A reminder that no matter how big the stage they step on, they are still human beings who feel longing, fear, affection, and the desire to still take care of each other. If that night Jungkook revealed the truth, then the next morning Jimin showed the answer. He was crying not because he was sad, but because he had probably waited too long for Jungkook to say the things he had felt deep down, and from that moment on, their relationship was no longer the same. Not because it's changing, but because it's finally being honest with each other, and that honesty makes everything feel new, warmer, and stronger than ever.